Okay, welcome everyone to the School Improvement Institute Learning Community for Cycle 1 schools. We are prepping for Council Discussion 5, which is on interventions. This is actually the most important discussion that you'll have. Really, your school improvement plan is just as strong as your interventions. It's really important that this is a step that you hit with gusto. So a couple of introductions. I think we've met all of you, but I'm Sue Reynolds. I'm president of the Student Achievement Institute. And then also with us is Mary Beth Granderson, who is the SI2 Strategic Planning Specialist. Couple of things about GoToWebinar. If you click the little orange arrow on the control panel, that will minimize the control panel. And then if you click it again, it will enlarge it once again. And then remember too that you have a mute button, so if there's some background noise and you want to be able to mute your telephone or your microphone, just hit that mute button. That will work really well. Okay, a couple of things. One update, we just want to let you know if you have not seen the council discussion video, the discussion prompt, it is in a new format. We had some great input from principals last month, and basically our target is to keep that council discussion prompt to a 10-minute video. I know in the past they've been like 40 or 45 minutes. So what we've cut out is the big picture perspective. So there's a very quick, a short review of where we've been. There's a very short preview of where we're going, just 2 seconds worth, and then we go straight to instructions. And basically we're saying to the council, okay, let's do this. And very thankful to James McNeely from Guerin Catholic High School. James actually decided to record his own video prompt, which I thought was really well done. And he forwarded that to us, which gave us some ideas about how to maybe better do the council prompts. James is also using a free tool where you can create your own videos. It's called screencast-o-matic.com. We're actually recording this small learning community with that. So there's a lot of cool tools on that, and it's very, very easy to use. So you always have the option. We give you tools like this, the different videos, but you always, of course, have the option to do what works best for your school. Okay, a couple things we wanted to point out that are coming up. We're still developing the online system for this month, and we'd like to ask you to hold off on entering your interventions until, Mary Beth, help me out, is March 19th? Is that right?
Yes, March 19th.
Okay, so if you'll hold off on entering interventions until March 19th, we will be providing you with a student body discussion prompt. That's a piece of paper. It will give you a place where you can list some of your root causes and then let the kids brainstorm about interventions. And then there's a couple changes we're making, or actually additions we're making to the intervention entry page. And then we're also adding a few crosswalk reports. The crosswalk reports, we'll get into those in a minute, but they are really, I think, what makes SI2 so rich is that we give you tools to assess the strength of your school improvement plan. And it gives us tools to assess the strength of your school improvement plan. So once you get all the interventions in, then there will be all kinds of tools that you can use to assess the strength of those interventions in terms of reaching your SMART goals. Okay, that brings us up to tips. One of the things we wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of is that when you enter your interventions, they actually end up in lots of different reports, including your school improvement plan. And those reports are read by lots of different people, folks at DOE, your school board, the public, if you, and so we wanted to make you aware of that. I think it's especially in interventions because that tends to be what people look at a lot. Our advice would be that you make sure that your words are spelled correctly and your grammar's correct, because those documents will represent your school. So I know you'll want them to be well done. Okay, one other thing, when you're entering interventions, you will be asked if you want to exclude the interventions from a publicly searchable database. Right now in that database we have about 22,000 interventions that schools are doing, and that gives folks, including your council, the chance to go in and say, you know, show me interventions that address student engagement in math classes, or show me interventions that address uh, ratios, or, you know, whatever, or attendance. And then the system will pop out all the interventions that schools that we've worked with over the years have implemented to address those things. So it's just kind of a way to help you search for ideas. But if you don't want to be included in that database, that searchable database, just check that box that says please exclude us. Okay, another thing we wanted to just make sure that you're thinking about as you start to design your interventions is one of the questions we're going to ask you is this an intervention that's inside the classroom or outside the classroom? So if it's something that your teachers are doing inside the classroom, that's obvious. If it's outside the walls of the classroom, then it's outside. So that's one of the areas that we'd like you to look at in one of the crosswalk reports. Our experience has been is that when interventions happen inside the classroom, when what we're impacting is curriculum rigor or instruction, especially student engagement, classroom assessments to inform, to do two things. One is to allow you to identify students who need extra help, but then also classroom assessments to help the teacher understand the impact of their teaching strategies. Also inside the classroom, extra help that teachers provide the students that are struggling, and then classroom discipline. Those tend to be the 5 areas that when we see schools that improve the most, that's what they're really hitting. So it's things that are happening inside the classroom. So in that crosswalk report, you'll be able to identify then how many of your strategies are really focused at classroom activities versus outside classroom. There are also strong and good outside the classroom activities. As we look at our elements of high achieving schools, guidance and outside extra help are really important. And then in the environment element, parent involvement is also, we think, really important. So just wanted to touch base on those and to encourage you to really be thinking about things that are happening inside the classroom. Okay, so a couple things and actually let me change the slide real quickly. I did not get this one updated. So the question here is, why do schools implement activities outside the classroom? Those activities tend to be safe. They're not really asking teachers to do anything different in their instruction. So if we have a school that's really focused on, just everybody getting along in harmony, and they might not want to, really talk with teachers about what's happening in their classrooms, those schools tend to avoid interventions that are happening in the classroom. And then the other, what's the danger of implementing only outside the classroom interventions is that some of those tend to make us feel good, but they're not really hitting the area where we want to hit, which is the inside the classroom things. Sometimes they give us the impression that we're doing something, that we're making changes, when really everything happening in the classroom is still the same. They might provide a false sense of security, but the worst thing is that they use up a valuable time and energy. So some of the things that happen outside the classroom are important. I was a former high school counselor and middle school counselor, and I think that school guidance and counseling is incredibly important to raising student achievement. But we could have the best school counseling program in the world, and if our algebra teachers were really teaching watered down general math, it wouldn't make any difference how good our school counseling program was. So we want, again, you to think both about inside the classroom and outside, and really kind of think about where you're putting your energy. Okay, let's go on. Okay, so another thing we'd like you to really think about is when you're entering your interventions into the online system. There's two parts. You'll go to this Part 1 tab, and you'll click on that, and you'll be asked to enter title and description and some questions about the intervention. But we wanted to talk about this Part 2 tab. So on Part 2, you'll be entering the person responsible, you'll be entering the implementation dates, you'll be deciding what kind of energy is required. And this, again, this is going to print out in a crosswalk report, so you'll be able to see how many of your interventions are going to require a lot of energy on your faculty's part and which are requiring low. And what we're looking for there is, in that crosswalk report is, do the teachers really have the capacity, the time, and the energy to do everything that you have planned in the school improvement plan? Okay, then the last part is really important. Let's just jump ahead 1 month. Next month, we're going to be developing the interventions that you select. So we need to know what parts we need to develop. So if this were a real rigorous something about instruction that all teachers are doing intervention, we would probably want a professional development plan for it. So you'd want to check professional development. If this intervention were going to require funding, we'd need to come up with a plan for getting those funds or resources. Maybe it's an intervention that's requiring volunteers from the community. And so we'd want to, make sure that we've got a plan for securing those volunteers. The other thing is that if it's a very comprehensive intervention, you're probably going to need an action plan. There's, often we talk with schools that they don't have an action plan. August rolls around, they're ready to implement the intervention, but the intervention's not ready to implement. So an action plan will kind of keep you, on task to make sure that the intervention's ready when you're ready to implement. So in this section, for each of your interventions, we want you to really think carefully, what am I going to need? Do I need to train my teachers? Do I need funding? Do I need, an action plan? And just check off the things you're going to need. And then in April next month, the steering team will work to make sure that each of those things that you've checked are developed. Again, all of this work is just a waste of time if those interventions don't get implemented with integrity. So this is, we think, a really important thing for you to do, is to be identifying, what do you have to do to make sure those interventions go in place and are implemented across the board the way they're supposed to be implemented. So, okay, so just wanted to make sure that we had mentioned that. Then, when you submit your interventions, we'd like you to understand what we're checking. So when you send us an intervention, the first thing, we're going to read each individual intervention separately. You can imagine how much work that is for our staff to do that. We're reading for every single one of our schools, every single intervention. So, and what we're looking for is the intervention well written? If somebody in the public reads that intervention title or reads the description, are they going to know what you're doing? And I think we're in a good position because to know that, because we're not actually in your building. We're not privy to all the discussions that you had in coming up with that intervention. So if we don't know what you're doing based on what we're reading, you can pretty much bet that the public's not knowing either. So, and then the other thing we're checking for with the intervention is, does it really address the external expectations that are indicated? So if you say, I'm a Title I school, or I'm PL 221, I'm using this for PL 221, or I'm a priority school, and I'm going to use this intervention to meet this requirement. We'll just kind of double check there to see if we think that intervention is really related to that requirement. And then if not, we'll, have a conversation with you about that. So this is really time consuming on our part, as well as I know it is for you to write the interventions on your part. But we think this is an important check. I would ask you to be patient. There are some days when our staff, Mary Beth, may get 100 interventions all in one day to read. So we're working as fast as we can. We extend our work hours when we need to make sure that we're keeping up. But do be patient in this time, if you don't get a response immediately. Okay, then the other thing we check is we also want to look at all of the interventions collectively. So after you're finished entering interventions, you'll send us a note. I'll show you how to do it in a minute, but you'll send us a note saying, okay, we're finished entering interventions, and you'll submit all the interventions as a whole. And at that point, our staff, Mary Beth, is checking for two things. One is she's checking for are all of the external expectations met? And if you've missed one of them, then she'll be giving you feedback to let you know, ooh, you missed this requirement for whatever. And then the other thing is we're looking at the interventions collectively to see if, in our opinion, all those interventions together have the power to impact each of your root causes and each of your SMART goals. So sometimes what we find is, we start to look at all these interventions, and they're all like fluff interventions. There's no real meaty interventions that are going to impact things in the classroom. And we look at it and we say, gosh, the school has these goals, and here's these interventions, and that's not going to work. That's not going to do it. So if we don't think that you have the right interventions to really impact your root cause, we'll let you know. And again, if we don't think that you have the right root causes and the right interventions to impact your SMART goals, we'll kind of give you some feedback on that as well. Of course, this is all a little subjective, but after doing this work for 20 years with hundreds of schools, we kind of have a sense of what we need to see in the school improvement plan for achievement to go up. So these are areas where we take our coaching very seriously with your school. So just wanted to kind of let you know how we're doing that. And then in the online system, I'll show you how that will work. In the online system, for interventions, when you're entering this, the first part of interventions is going to get you down to where you're opening the discussion and then monitoring the discussion. So that's what you'll do to, up front to begin with. Then, when you're finished having the discussion, you're going to enter the interventions, and when you click on this screen, or sorry, that button, you can see that this is a sample school. I only have 2 interventions in. But what you're going to see here is another icon, and this is not there yet, but there'll be another little button that says Submit. So when I'm happy with the 7th grade ratios unit intervention, I would just hit that Submit, and that will tell Mary Beth that you want us to review that individual intervention. And then same thing with attendance monitors. There will also be a column here that will tell you the status of that intervention, if it meets criteria, if we'd like you to reword something or rethink something, the comments will be in here as well. Okay, so that's how you submit the individual interventions. Again, if we look at the intervention section, we're here on the step that says Enter Interventions, and you click on that icon. Then, when you're ready to have us look at all of your interventions collectively, you're going to come down to this other step that says Submit Interventions. I think we're going to change it to say Submit Collective Interventions. And then you'll just hit on this Submit button, and that tells Mary Beth that you're ready for us to look at all of your interventions as a whole. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so that's the intervention submission. Okay. Excuse me. So in this section, we'd like to show you some common mistakes that schools make, and this is a section just for you to pretend you're Mary Beth and schools have submitted this to you, and let's see what you come up with. So here's the first one. So you've gotten in an intervention, And this time, let's look at the title. And these are actually real submissions from past schools. So here's a common mistake. We get an intervention in, we look, and here's a title that says Big Al. And in our minds, we're picturing one of the reports that just prints out all of the interventions by title with no description, just anything, just the title. And so, we're picturing here's, intervention number 4, and all it says is Big Al. So obviously, the problem with this is that that title is so vague and it's not descriptive, and we don't know what that means. In this case, this was an after-school tutoring program, and Big Al was the nickname that the kids had for the bus that took them home after the tutoring project. So in-house, in the school, everybody knew what Big Al was. But anybody in the public, people at DOE, our staff, we have no clue when all we're saying is that title in some reports. Okay, here's another one. So this is a very, very common mistake that can get you into a lot of trouble down the road when we start to evaluate the interventions after they're being implemented. So the title for this one is Extra Help for Algebra 1. So, title's not too bad. I kind of get that extra help is happening. It's a little vague, though. I don't really know if it's happening, in the classroom or outside of the classroom, or, is it going to be part of an activity period? The title's a little bit vague. But here's the description, which should give me a little bit more information. So an extended 2-period Algebra 1 class will be offered for freshmen who don't pass or fail the 8th grade I-STEP. In addition, math tutoring will be offered before school. So as I look at that one, I'm just wondering if anything jumps out at you as you're looking at that. An extended Algebra 1 class will be offered for freshmen who failed the 8th grade I-STEP. In addition, math tutoring will be offered before school. So, so when I close my eyes and look at that one, I can get a picture of what's happening. Here's a Algebra 1 class that's going to last for 2 periods. Cool. I get that. And then I've got math tutoring that's going to happen before school. So I get that too. The problem with this one is that we've got 2 different initiatives, 2 different interventions combined into one intervention. And the issue with that is going to be later when you're trying to determine if this intervention called Extra Help for Algebra 1 is successful. Well, what if the math tutoring before school gets into place, but the extended Algebra 1 period class does not get into place? Then, then was the intervention successful or not? Was it implemented or was it not implemented? So the problem with this one is that we've got 2 interventions in one, written as one intervention. So what we would like to suggest to schools is to not be groupers. We don't want to put more than one intervention under a common title. So so if Mary Beth were to say, you're grouping in this intervention, please split it out. That's what we're talking about. Typically, kind of a red flag that we've got a grouper is that things will tend to be numbered, and then we'll say, okay, this is really 3 different interventions. Or there's a lot of ands. The parent liaison will create a parent volunteer program and hold a monthly parenting workshop, and so those are kind of some of the clues. What we suggest you do is just to be a splitter. And so that's the same interventions, it's the same amount of work. We've just written them as 4 different ideas so that we could say separately, was this successful, was that successful, was that successful? I think sometimes people are groupers because it feels like less work, but it's really the same amount of work. Okay, then here is another issue with the description. And before we were looking at the title, now we're looking at what could go wrong with the description. So here's a description. All students will improve problem-solving skills across the curriculum. So my guess is that for all of us reading this right now, if we closed our eyes and thought about what does that look like, we would all come up with different ideas. This also is vague. This time it's not the title that's vague, but it's the description that's vague. Another kind of red flag for me is that this describes what the students are going to be doing, and it actually doesn't even describe that. It just says that they're improving an academic skill. So really, interventions almost all the time are designed to change adult practices. So the interventions are changing something that the adults are doing, and then as a result, we see student changes. So description normally would describe adults, and it would describe what the adults are doing. So, it's looking very quickly, one sentence at the, what are they doing? How are they doing it? When are they doing it? Just getting in, as many, kind of like the lead-in sentence on a newspaper article. So, okay. And then here's another one that can be extremely problematic to the strength of your school improvement plan. So let's say that this is for a strategy called community attendance incentives. When we read the description, it was about how community organizations are going to provide some major incentives for students who have strong attendance and maybe only absent twice a year or something like that. So here's how they described in the online system that intervention. So the first thing, which root causes does this intervention address? Absenteeism. Student group gaps is a student group. Does this intervention specifically address a student group? No. Does this intervention address Title I target assistance students? No. Then we've checked which elements of high achieving schools this addresses: instruction, extra help in the learning environment. And then the same thing with the turnaround principles: school culture and climate, use of time, and family community engagement. So as I look at this, I'm thinking that the schools made some claims about this intervention that the intervention's not going to be able to live up to. And the danger of this is that it makes it appear like we're doing more than we're actually doing. So this is an attendance initiative. Okay, so first of all, the big flag for me was the elements of high achieving schools. This attendance initiative is definitely going to impact the learning environment. We're going to get kids to school. I mean, that's a big part of the learning environment. But is it really going to impact instruction? Sometimes schools will really kind of, really reach on thinking in these areas. So someone might say, well, yeah, it'll impact instruction because if kids are there, then they're going to be able to hear the instruction. Or is it really going to impact extra help? So someone might say, well, yeah, because if the kids are at school, they'll be able to participate in extra help. So in my opinion, those are kind of reaches. In an instruction strategy or intervention, we would really expect that to change how the teacher's teaching. Or if it's extra help, we would really expect it to change the amount or the type of extra help that kids are getting. So to say that this initiative on absenteeism is going to impact instruction and extra help, to me, that's a real reach. So I caution you to not make claims for your interventions that the intervention can't live up to. If you do that a lot, when you look at the instruction crosswalk report, it'll look like you're doing 10, 11, 12 things that are going to impact instruction. It'll make you feel really good. It'll make you look good to the community. You're doing all this stuff to impact instruction. But if everything in that list has been a reach, it's not really stuff that's going to impact instruction, then you've got a problem. It feels good. It makes you think that you've got a strong school improvement plan, but you really don't. So again, don't make claims for your interventions that they're really not going to live up to. The other thing with this one, that if I were reading this review, if I were reviewing this intervention, the other thing that I'd be wondering about is that the root cause was absenteeism, but not in all students. It was primarily male students. And in the student group gap, when I'm describing the intervention, I'm saying that this intervention is not addressed to specifically reach the male students. So I'd want to be looking for, is there another intervention that's going to really address the male issues with absenteeism in that school? And if not, then when I look at all those interventions together, if not, then I'd be contacting the school and saying, how are males going to improve at a greater rate than females, because you haven't done anything that really focus in on those males. So that's something to think about too, is that when you're connecting the intervention with a root cause, we want to make sure the intervention is actually addressing that root cause. So okay. This page is really important when you're entering the interventions, because it's from this page that we're going to print all those crosswalk reports to really help you analyze what are your interventions collectively doing. Okay. So we just did that. Okay, so here are some what would you do's. And what would you do? So you're listening, you're at a faculty meeting, and everybody's, has been participating in the online council discussions, and you hear someone say, or maybe even you're thinking, well, these strategies are Title I strategies, they're not SI2 strategies. Or these are advanced ed strategies, they're not SI2. Or these are our high schools that work strategies, they're not our SI2 strategies. So what would you do in that situation? Is that okay? Does a school have Title I strategies and advanced ed strategies and SI2 strategies and high schools at work strategies? So I guess our answer to that question would be no, that the SI2 strategies should include all of your strategies, so that in your school improvement plan, you're seeing the whole picture. You're seeing, especially when we're looking at time and energy in that crosswalk report, you're saying, okay, collectively between all of our Title I strategies, our advanced ed strategies, our high schools at work strategies, our PL 221 strategies, they're all in the school improvement plan, so that when we collectively look at all those strategies, we know what's going on in the school. So once in a while, we'll hear a school say, well, those were our Title I strategies, so we didn't put them in our SI2 plan. And we just want to remind everybody that the SI2 is an umbrella that incorporates all these other initiatives that you might be involved in. And we want to make sure that all those interventions or strategies get into the school improvement plan, so that you can see the big picture, everything that you're doing to raise student achievement. Okay, then here's another thing that may come up. I can almost promise you this one's going to come up. People will say, oh, this is, because this is the first time we're looking at interventions. And if your teachers have not been involved in your council discussions, this is the first time that they've heard, oh, we're going to be doing something differently next year. So you may hear things like this. This is just one more thing we have to do, or we've done this before. Are they going to pay us for doing this? They can't make me do this. So we think it's very likely, and probably you will get some resistance at this point. Up to now, we've all been talking about, how to pick the best strategies, the best interventions, but now we're talking about doing the best interventions. And chances are people are going to say, oh my gosh, we can't do this. It's just one more thing. So we want to help you to realize that this is normal. This is natural. Anytime someone asks someone else to change what they're doing, there's always resistance in all of us. So we think that this is something you should expect, and just kind of be ready for it. And some of it you can head off before it happens. And I just want to take a minute to talk about that. So resistance is triggered by the fear of losing something. So when you hear those kinds of comments, just one more thing, are they going to pay us? Oh, we're already overwhelmed. There's a fear of losing something there. So one of the things we really want to encourage you to do as you're starting to fine-tune and select strategies or interventions is to think about, how might people react to this? What could they be afraid of losing? And hopefully, if you can identify that before the before announcing the interventions and bringing all the staff on board, if you can predict what they're going to be afraid of losing and put them at ease that it's going to be okay before you start talking about these interventions, you'll have a lot less resistance. But if you do get resistance, immediately we would suggest that you start thinking immediately, what is that person afraid of losing? I do that in my personal life. I do it in my professional life. What are they afraid of losing if I start to hear some pushback into something that I've suggested? And we all do that. I do that too. If somebody asks me to do something differently, I'm like, my first reaction is no. But then I have to think, what I'm afraid of losing, is that really going to be the case? So at any rate, so here are things that are typical. People are typically afraid of losing time, big one for educators, because there is not enough time on educators have to handle everything on their plates. So time, control, who's going to be in control over my classroom? Is it going to be the Indiana Department of Education? Is it going to be me? Is it going to be the School Improvement Council? Who's controlling my classroom? Is it going to be that they're afraid of losing the value that they have? That because you're asking them to do something different, you don't value the things that they've always done? Or it may also be that they're afraid of losing their reputation. They know that they were pretty good at teaching the way that they used to teach. And now we're trying something new. I don't know if I'm going to be good at it. So people are resistant because they're normal, and they're afraid of losing something that's valuable to them. So the key then is figuring out what they're afraid of losing, and then how can we help someone who has this fear. So as you start to really hone in on those interventions, we suggest that your steering team spends some time talking about, okay, who's going to be resistant, what are they going to be afraid of losing, and how can we help them along with that so that they want to embrace these interventions. This is a chart that we call the stages of change, and this is something, again, that as you're introducing interventions, we think it's important to understand how people change. And in this case, the change you want is that you want them to implement these new interventions. So in the very beginning, when you say, okay, folks, the council and the steering team and everybody that got involved in the discussion has decided this is what we're going to do next year, the first thing people are going to need is information. That's the stage of change that they're in. The question they're going to have is, what is this? So what you need to focus on is just answering their questions. And a lot of times what schools will do here is they'll do a presentation to say, okay, here's our school improvement plan for next year. Here are the different components of it. Give some of the details, and then answer any questions that folks have. So you might get some resistance that gets expressed right then. Most likely people nod their heads, and then they're going to either freak out or they're going to say, yeah, let's do it. So the next step is that people will be interested, and it may not be a positive interest. It may be like, oh my gosh, how is this going to impact me? I don't have the time. I don't have the, whatever. So, but they'll be interested. So now we want the focus to be to personalize the message that you're giving to folks, and we would suggest a strategy that we call talk to again. So that's one-on-one meeting with people. If you had, and it could be one-on-one with everybody in the school. Sometimes we've seen schools where the principal will sit down with everybody and say, do you have any question about these interventions? Is there anything that we should be considering that we're not? Or sometimes it's the steering team that does that. So in those one-on-one talks, we're explaining to people what their personal role is. We're answering any questions, and we're listening very carefully to see if any fears come up. And if so, then we're addressing those fears. We're explaining how this won't take extra time, or how they are going to excel at doing this too, because there's going to be all these professional development, or we're going to add time to them, but we're going to take time off somewhere else. So we're really, we're individualizing the presentation. And especially if you're not going to talk to everybody in the school, in this initial presentation, anyone who seems a little negative, that's having questions, we definitely want to make sure that we're talking with them. The other thing to keep in mind is that sometimes the resistors are right. they're thinking of something that we haven't thought of yet. So it's really important to listen to them, to think, ooh, maybe we missed the boat on this one. So, okay, so once people kind of get it and they understand how they are going to fit in, then we're starting to prepare. The question that people are going to have now is, how do I do it? Then we want to provide sound professional development. There's nothing worse than sending teachers in to do a strategy that they don't understand how to implement well. So next month we're going to talk about designing good professional development, and then the activity would be workshops, seminars, that kind of thing. Then the teachers will start to do it. Their question is going to be, did I do okay? Does it work? And we're going to provide feedback or coaching, lots of different ways to do that. And then finally, after this gets going and everybody starts to implement, people start to ask, how can I do this better? And peer-to-peer networking at that point we found to be really helpful. We'll go over this again next month when we get to designing professional development. But the first two steps of change are going to happen right now as soon as you start talking about interventions. People are going to want to know, what is this? How is it going to impact me? And they're going to have all kinds of fears. And to help you out down the road, we really want to address all of that. Okay, so let's see what questions you have. And I know there's a lot of content in this month's small learning community, and we're working in this particular small learning community. We have a very few people participating. This is the noon group, and there's not a lot of people that are having their lunch with us. So at any rate, let's see if we have any questions. And Mary Beth, is there anything that I may have confused people on, or anything that we need to add?
I don't have anything to add or clarify.
Okay. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you. And let's just see, I don't see any hands up. Anybody who's participating live want to jump in? Okay, so I guess the last thing is just to remind everybody that Mary Beth's available for you if you have questions. And this again, I kind of opened with, this is the most important step. And what's key about it is that the interventions that you're selecting are not just random, but this whole process has led to those interventions. They're going to be strong. They're going to link to your root causes. They're going to change what happens inside the classroom. We want to be there big time to help you with this. We've committed our staff to really digging in at this point, even more than we normally do. So call Mary Beth if you have any questions at all, or if you just want to have her look at a draft of something, or you start to get resistance and you're not sure what to do. Call Mary Beth. Use her. That's what she's there for. So we view Mary Beth as a member of your school improvement team. So just make sure you're using her. So okay, I think that's it. Mary Beth, anything else to add?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay, remember it's the 5-second rule, right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thanks everybody, and we wish you lots of luck in designing those high leverage interventions, and then we'll talk next month about how to develop them so that they're implemented with integrity. So okay, thanks everyone. We'll talk to you next month.